Tell me what I need. Tell me what you need. You don't have anybody that can add value. So again, a lot of developers, sure, I can do that. What do you need? That's a sure warning sign right there. If I walked in, I know what you need. Let me show you. Okay, you're an expert. That's a big difference that can help you in the front end of the process.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. The main challenge with ERP is that it cannot address 100% of your organization's needs. No matter how good it is, there will always be company-specific needs such as reporting or KPIs. There are also likely to be several integrations that you might require, such as integrating your inventory forecasting, demand planning system, or e-commerce. These integrations and reporting requirements will drive changes to your core ERP functionality, such as exposing additional data fields through interfaces or screens. While customizations provide great flexibility to tailor the experience to your needs, over-customizing could fire back due to increased technical debt and maintenance. In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss the customization of ERP systems and the resulting nightmares because of it. We covered several grounds in this episode, including the difference between configuration, customization, and integration. We also discussed when customization makes sense and when it could be overkill, and why customizing the ERP system is so difficult. With that, let's get to the conversation.
Hey guys, welcome everyone to today's show, and today we have a very exciting topic. There's always going to be a debate about whether to customize ERP, whether not to customize ERP. What is an ERP? So we are going to be talking about all of that. If you are joining for the first time, this is part of our digital transformation series, and we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, and we always have one panel that is going to discuss one very exciting topic related to digital transformation. So for today, it's going to be customization of ERP versus the maintenance nightmares. Okay, so we are going to start with everybody's intro. Chris, would you like to start with your intro if you don't mind?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Garridini. I'm the president and owner of Turnkey Technologies. We've been implementing and selling ERP solutions and customizing them for over 27 years. So we have some context on the topic. Glad to be here.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for joining, Chris, today. Martin, I would like to move to you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm CIO for an automotive parts manufacturer and managing partner of Denelm Associates, working with ERPs and all sorts for quite a few years myself.
Okay, amazing. And your background is going to be super beneficial, Martin, looking at different ERP. And I would like to discuss a little bit about Industry 4.0 flavor as well, because that is going to have a lot of issues from the configuration as well as from the add-on perspective. So it's going to be super interesting to discuss the architectural issues there. Thank you so much for joining today. Mike, can I move to you next, if you don't mind? Can you introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Sam. Hey, glad to be here. My name is Mike Schlagenhofer. I got about 40 plus years in manufacturing. For the last 6 years, I work for a casualty and property insurance carrier that covers about 7,000 manufacturers.
Okay, amazing. And Mike, obviously you have seen it all. In my mind, the add-on, if you want to look at the add-ons or the ERP issues, they start from the contract. And you have signed a lot of them. You have seen a lot of different issues. So your experiences are going to be super beneficial. Ashish, can I move to you next for your introduction, if you don't mind?
Sure, great. Hey, good evening, everyone, and good afternoon to some folks in the West Coast. My name is Ashish Parlekar. I'm a senior director on technology and ERP implementations. have a former consulting background, worked at IBM and Deloitte before. So I've seen a lot of clients do ERP transformations. I've seen the good and the bad of customizations and even modifications of source code. So we will talk. This is going to be a very lively and interesting discussion. There's a lot of passion coming out today.
Aaron, can I move to you next? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Aaron Spool. I'm a seasoned CFO, managing director of Aventus Advisor Group. So we're an on-demand CFO controller and accounting firm. I interact with ERPs either through using them for financial reporting or paying for them.
And that's a very interesting experience always, because you are the one who's actually going to cut the check, and we need to please you. So thank you so much for being here, Aaron.
My pleasure.
All right, guys. So we are going to dig right into the topic. So first, we need to define what is a customization when it comes to ERP, what is a configuration, and what is going to be the integration. So Chris, I am actually going to start with you. From your experience, how do you define the customization? A lot of people are super confused. So what is going to be customization, what is going to be configuration, and what is going to be integration when it comes to ERP?
Absolutely. And I think the easy one to define is we talk about configuration. These are data-driven changes, right? There's no code. And so just as I make that statement, as we think about what is a customization, there's some point where code is introduced into an installation. Again, typically inside the application. So if you think about, is it peripheral? Well, we're not going to consider that customizing the core ERP, but when we introduce code into the core ERP, if we change and we alter a business process programmatically, right? Okay, that's what I define as a customization. Integrations, again, integrations are peripheral to a degree. They may be touching an API. They're not invasive, okay? So an invasive customization can alter the business process. It can actually change and violate GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. So again, it's much more invasive is where we're adding code to the installation. That's my definition. So
okay, so I am going to have some questions for you in terms of the amount of efforts required. Typically, when customers think, configuration, you flip the switch and it's going to be done, right? That's how easy ERP is supposed to be, and you should be able to install within 5 days. So why is configuration so hard when it comes to ERP?
I think based on the application, and we have a lot of products in the market, it's the number of on-off switches. And I'll use that example. I sell one platform that has, let's say, 100 switches. And then I've got a bigger one that has 1,500 switches. And if you think about permutations, I have switch A on and switch B on and switch C off. Okay, well, so again, those configurations and permutations can create different behaviors. And so I think as we rationalize, do we need a customization? Normally, the first part of that process is vetting. Is there a configuration combination that yields the outcome? That's it. But configuration, it can be complex. And again, as we get into the bigger systems, there's so much more configurability just to that point because they address so many diverse types of businesses.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for that. And Martin, I'm actually going to move to you. From your experience, how do you define the customization, configuration, integration? Especially, I am looking to see in terms of the amount of effort, because a lot of people think that, configuration is supposed to be easy. You are not supposed to be, in my mind, when you look at the configuration, you still have to follow the software development life cycle because you have to still come up with these test cases. You still have to test. You still have to, sort of go through the 70% of the software development life cycle. The only thing you are not really doing is the coding, right? So that's how I like to think. So in your experience, do you feel that configuration is supposed to be any easier than programming? Is it more difficult? Does it require more time? So difference between customization, configuration, and integration in your opinion.
And I'll throw an extra one in there, which is orchestration as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'll throw an extra term in, just confuse things even more.
Yeah.
So I define configuration very similar to what Chris does, which is the fact that configurations is a series of switches, whatever. It's a series of settings. The major difference between configurations and customizations is, generally speaking, configurations can just carry over from one version to the next if you upgrade. Customizations often tend to have to be rewritten if you upgrade to a newer version. So therefore, the pain and the cost multiplies up because of that. And if you think about it, if let's say you spend $50,000 writing some customizations for something in your ERP, let's say you upgrade once a year. And you've got to re-implement that every year. Okay, maybe it's not going to cost you $50,000 every year because you've already spec'd it or whatever else. Let's say it's $30,000 a year. So over 10 years, that $50,000 change is $50,000 and 9 lots of $30,000. Yeah. So from a CFO standpoint, that small change, which may have had a return on investment of, let's say, it's saved $100,000 of work, but over 10 years it's cost you 400,000 odd, or whatever the number is. And if you think about that in terms of, is this something that was actually harming your ability to keep using this tool? And so, just to move on to what you also said, integrations again are, I think Chris said it very well. Is integrations on the periphery. And it came across this term recently, orchestrations, which was used in context of some ERPs have abilities to call a stored procedure type routine that is external to the ERP, but allows you to actually do a certain piece of logic without harming the central code of the ERP. So those types of things tend to be on the edge, peripheral to it, but can be called. I tend to think of it like a stored procedure almost. Again, those are a bit like a configuration. They're external to the main code. You're not harming the main code. You're not changing the main code. You're not in that kind of code piece of it, which is going to harm your ability to maintain, your ability to upgrade, etc., etc.
Okay, some amazing insights there, and I am probably going to have a clarifying question for you as well, especially your comment about if you move from version 1 to version 2, and then probably you can move your configuration without much effort. So let's say I don't know how similar these versions are, because there could be a drastic change in the data model of the version, and sometimes your configuration may not move from version 1 to version 2. Now, I'll give you a scenario, Martin, okay? So some people, what they think is, you know what, I have my entity 1, and I have all of my master data here. And now what I am trying to do is I am trying to spin off another entity because I'm probably opening another office. It could be a new branch. Now, my chart of accounts are similar. My customers probably are going to be newer in this case, but the majority of the configuration that I am looking for from the finance perspective, from the operations perspective, so it should be like flipping a switch in the new instance, right? So I should be able to do it within 5 days. But that's not true, because when you actually install a new entity, then what is going to happen is you have to test not only this entity, you have to test the interaction of this entity with the existing entity. So it's going to be a massive project. So do you agree with this, or are you going to feel that, you know what, since this is only a configuration, it's just a minor change in the configuration because the other entity is not as different, so it's not going to require as much effort? What would be your thoughts on this one?
I think it depends on the ERP. It depends on how things are orchestrated. Sorry, didn't mean it as a joke, by the way. How things are configured and everything else. Because in a lot of cases, adding a new plant or a new warehouse or whatever else can be a very simple configuration that doesn't need a lot of retesting. If, however, you're doing things which are unusual to your ERP and you're forcing change into it, your customizations, then maybe it becomes a maintenance nightmare. It becomes something you've got to retest. And then you get into all of the pain and the suffering that you're talking about. Yeah, you should be able to add an extra entity in lots of cases without having to go through a major retest, maybe major regression testing or whatever. I think maybe you should throw that question out to the others as well, because they've got varying experiences and everything else. And I think it's worth hearing other opinions on that.
Yeah, I am definitely interested in that. So maybe, Ashish, I don't know, what is your experience overall in terms of the customization configuration, how you would, incorporate this as part of the project plan? And I'm pretty sure you are managing the P&L. So you have to sign the budget and you have to get the realistic picture of how much effort it is going to be. So let's say if somebody comes to you and they are simply launching, let's say, a new entity or the plant, and they are going to claim that I can do it in 10 days. Would you believe them? Would you go with the project because you don't want any surprises once you are actually part of the project, right?
Right. So again, we will have to look at what you're adding. So like Martin said, but I like what Chris mentioned up is the configuration begins with your, either a new master data that you're adding, right? Yeah. Because think about an ERP system is built based on an industry standard, like whatever is the industry based, how you do your finance, how you do your manufacturing and all that. It doesn't know how we do our business in our own. So when I say we, it's a company buying and implementing an ERP, right? So that configuration part is taking a standard software and configuring it to meet your business needs, right? How your plans are handled, how your chart of account is done, so that's part of the configuration. But then the customization has nuances to it, right? The customization could be local, global, state-wise, right? So you might add a configuration, but you could also do some additional customization to have reports which are specific to a state. Or I'm just staying within the US, but when you go global, there might be configuration which are localization that are needed, right? Those are the and then the extreme case of customization is when you start modifying the source code. And sometimes the ERPs provide you the source code, and they absolutely tell you don't modify, the source code, because then you're changing the ownership on that code. Now you'll have to, every time, like Martin said, when there is a new upgrade comes in, the configurations get carried over without any issues. You do have to do testing whenever new things change. If it's your critical, transactions of a line of business transactions, you have to do a regression testing to make sure they don't break, right? So that you will do, right? That's one extra work of testing. But adding a plant or adding master data should be a master data addition activity. It should not, unless it's heavy-handed where you've done a lot of customization, and because of the set of data, your code or your customization takes a different route, then you have to do a lot of testing. So that's why I said it depends on how extend. 10 days could be, it could be longer if it is a very, very complex process. Or it's a long end-to-end process where you have third parties involved in it, suppliers and banks and all that you might have to test with them. So I'm just expanding that testing aspect. I don't know whether I answered your question, but that's where I was going with configuration, customization, and then you had
integration.
Integration is absolutely. I mean, your ERP is self-contained. You want to exchange data with others, right? So you either they provide you an API to exchange data, or you build new. So that it fall under customization again, right? Because you will build some kind of a. But all this is done during the fit gap analysis of your blueprint, or when you do the explore, you start mapping what is capable from that ERP solution and what is a gap, and based on the gap, you start kind of getting into whether it's going to be a configuration, it's going to be a customization, or there's absolutely nothing provided by the ERP. So in that case, what you're going to build a custom routine or something like that to meet that requirement, because that's a critical requirement, MVP for your most viable product for your solution, right? So that's where I was.
So I am actually going to have a clarifying question for you as well. Some great insights there, but I am actually going to throw a twist there.
Okay.
Overall in terms of the ownership of the code. So you mentioned that, there is going to be OEM owned piece of code that you are going to get as part of your ERP. And then if you have to develop your own customization, if you have your own development team, then it's good. But let's say if you have a vendor in between, okay, sometimes they are going to have significant customizations owned by them, and they might not even share the code base with you. So now you are dependent upon that VAR. Okay, you are not only locked on the OEM. In case of OEM, what you could do is you can probably find another partner and work with them. But in this particular case, you are really locked with that VAR, because nobody else is going to know about what is written inside that. There is not going to be a lot of documentation, because obviously VARs don't have the development processes similar to the OEM. So when you look at the customization, do you look at the ownership piece of the code, who is going to own, or do you not look for it when you are, let's say, looking at the customization or buying the ERP?
Sure, I'll share my experience. And when we look at customization, we work with the vendor. So for example, whoever the vendor provider, in my case, it has been SAP many times. So we work with them if they are bringing this feature in the future releases, right? I mean, if that's possible, and if it's in the near roadmap, then it's great. Then we can talk to the business and see, can we live with that, right? But if it's not on the roadmap, then we have to build this. We have to take the ownership. I don't think we will let vendors or somebody else take ownership of that customization, right? And that customization better be good and worth the extent of modifying of. Because remember, it's like a warranty. When you change the source code, right, on the modification side, I'm talking about modification. Most of these ERP systems provide hooks where you can customize safely. So when you upgrade, with little effort, it can get carried over. But then when we make we call hard code modification, right? Mods to the code. At that point of time, you're pretty much owning that component of it. So when you upgrade, that's a manual step or a step that you have to make sure that's identified, documented, and then we carry over. So it's a cost of ownership that we kind of lock in with, and that's why it goes to almost the leadership level when you are doing a core mod on a big ERP implementation. So if you are saying that my specific operational, manufacturing operation is not that functionality is not provided by an ERP, and we need to do this core mod because we always did that because we had our own homegrown system and we were able to do all that capability there, but now it's not there. That's a gap. To fill that gap, we are doing a core mod. So we are getting leadership approval. It's a key design decision that is taken, right? So there are a lot of those, everybody's covering their back in that case, and then it's avoided in most cases. If we can work through workarounds, viable workarounds, that's where we look for options.
Okay, some amazing insights there. So now I'm actually going to move to Mike. And since Mike has actually looked at a lot of different contracts, and especially when you look at the SMB manufacturing space, obviously they are not going to be as sophisticated as, Ashish's team is, because typically he's working with the enterprise clients. Now, if you look at the ERP systems, especially in the SMB space, the majority of them are going to have, let's say, 80% of the functionality, 20% last mile functionality is not going to be there. That 20% last mile functionality is typically owned by the consulting company that is installing the ERP, and typically they own the right for that code. They are not going to share the rights of that code because it is their IP, it is their product. So from your experience, Mike, have you found any surprises with respect to ownership of the add-on, and when you are working with the customization? Because when you are going to customize, even though you are going to own the customized code, if the issue is going to be because of that piece that is sitting in between, you'll not be able to fix that because your OEM is going to say, what, I that's not my piece. I'm not part of it. Okay, the bar is going to say, what, I am not, that's my piece. But again, I don't know if the issue is going to be because of that. So there's going to be a lot of vendor conflict. So in your experience, have you experienced similar scenarios with respect to customization of the ERP, and what have you seen in terms of the best practices?
Well, the short answer is yes. The long answer is when I start working with a customer that's trying to put an ERP system in, and I think it's covered in some of your previous shows, my first thing is make a list of what you want, what are the must-haves, and then shop around. Truly, mind, you mentioned at the beginning of the show, all the ERP systems out there. Don't look at one, look at one. If you're new to ERP, I'm like, go with an off-the-shelf system. And then play with the system, use the system for a long time before you customize, because people don't really understand it, what they're going to get into. They're going to start customizing. That's what a lot of times happen on, we thought we're going to be done in 6 months, and 3 years later, we're still implementing, because as they implement, they're like, I want this, I want that, I want this. They don't understand. I think Chris and Martin explained this. You got customization, integration, right? Or now you got a new vendor coming on, or you got a new customer coming on, and they get overwhelmed by the system, and they say it's the ERP system's fault. And my answer to them is, let's go with a system off the shelf. You might not get the world, but you get 80%. Understand that system. Then before you even go back to your OEM for the ERP, say, here's what I want. And they might say, you know what? Again, we don't have the world over here, but we can cover 80% of that. Go with that, because you got to realize the manufacturers, they're good at making widgets. They're not good at dealing at this code and at the sourcing, at the program. So they see something, they want it, they want a quick fix, and they didn't think the problem through. So my thing is always stop, drop, and roll. Go back to your original OEM, to your ERP supplier. Ask them what their capabilities are, because they can come in and say, Chris used a good example. You don't need the 100 switches or 1,500 switches, I think Chris said. Let's turn 8 on. Let's play with the 8 switches. Are they perfect for you after you? Yes. Let's tweak switch number 7. Then we turn 10 more switches. People don't understand. ERP systems are easy when you work with them, when you have the experience, they are hard for manufacturers to understand. I think Anish says, you have 50 departments. You got accounting, you got manufacturing, you got materials, you got engineering, you got design, you got sales, right? They all want something different. And if you start going out there and listening to all of them, I think you do more damage to your ERP system. And your OEM's going to give you what you want, but it's going to cost you. And who's maintaining that? on how do you update it. I think Martin says, so in 2 years, I'm going to pay another $50,000 because we're moving along, we're moving this. So I don't know if I covered your question. To people, they get their feet wet in the ERP system and moving into the ERP. Guys, there's a lot of good systems out there. Bring those people in, work with them, understand what they offer, and then ask those questions. So if I want to add a new vendor, if I add a facility, if I do need to customize, I think if you go in a different country, there might be different tax reporting structures, different whatever else you need. Ask them what they do for you. And a lot of them guys, that's not their first rodeo. They say, hey, we got this package here. We can move that in. We don't need to create a true customization for Sam. We can use a customization from somebody else because we've done that 150 times. So I don't know. Does that answer your question, Sam?
Yeah, so it definitely does. I mean, that's a great insight, but I'm going to have one clarifying question for you as well. So as you know, in this episode, I am typically trying to act the manufacturing executive who is trying to buy an ERP system, right? So let's say if I'm going through the sales process, and as you know, how the sales process typically is in case of an ERP, it's going to have some sort of demo, then it's going to have some sort of negotiation. During the demo phase, you are looking at 5 different systems. Now, when you are going to look at system number 1 and system number 2, system number 1 could be completely owned by OEM. The system number 2 that you have could have 20% of the customization. Some of the fields that you are going to have on your sales orders may be owned by the consultant who is actually selling. So now, as a manufacturing executive, how do I understand who is owning which piece of the code, what is part of the customization, and what is part of the original ERP? I cannot tell this unless, number 1, I look at the contract. Number 2, I have expertise with these systems. So what is your recommendation? Let's say if I'm going through the standard process, I will never know which system am I buying. Am I buying the system completely owned by OEM? Even if you ask those questions, sometimes there are always going to be brush offs, right, in the sales process. So you would not know, who's owning which piece of code. So what would be your recommendation to an executive like me who's trying to procure these systems?
Well, that's a really good question because, like I said before, there is a lot behind there that people don't understand. They want the system that gives them the data, gives them the forecast, gives them all those nice fancy things, saves them, but they don't understand the nuts and bolts. So I would go back to the OEM and really sit down and ask that question that you said. So I'm buying this system. I want to modify it. Am I going to you, or do I need to go back to the guy that hooked me up with you? That's the question, man. It's plain simple. Because when you look at ERP contracts, you have to have 3 law degrees to understand what's in there. But I think most times when you get them, man, those ERP companies are very reputable. You put them on the table and you ask them that question, just like you asked me. How do you know? Okay, I want to modify. Do I go to you, or do I go back to this guy over here? And then, do I own it? Do I need to maintain it? Man, that's the question that they need to ask. And the people that I deal with from the ERP side, they're very honest. Even the in-between people, the consultants, the implementers, they are very honest and says, well, you need to come to me. I will negotiate with Chris. And then Chris is the tech expert to write the code, to implement it, to integrate. But you need to go through XYZ. Or no, you can directly call Chris up. Chris sends his guys down there tomorrow and they give you what it is. I know it's a little complicated because every company runs this a little bit different. And that's why companies that have ERP systems sometimes work with a company like Chris's company. They say, you're the boots on the ground. You got to deal with that part. We create this for you. You deal with that part. You work with the customer. You that go between. But that's the question you need to ask. That's my advice. Ask that question point blank. And don't say, okay, if you don't understand the answer. Where do I go to, and who is the responsible person to me?
Some amazing insights. The only comment I'm going to have there is, the other side of the table are all salespeople. They all are trying to win. It's not they are being dishonest or unethical. It's just that the way they are going to present the information, it is going to be in their best interest to be able to win. So you really need to read between the lines before you can really trust them.
Here's one thing I think my grandpa taught me this. He bought horses way back in the 1900s. I would say when I narrow it down to those 2 ERP implementers, I said, let me talk to your customers. that clears that sales pitch out. And I agree with you. Salespeople are not dishonest. They just, hey, this is my product. I believe it's the best. Let me talk to your customer. And then the question to that customer, when you wanted the customization, how was that? Who ended up helping you? Well, it took me 3 months to find the right party. Well, now you know that's what you're going to be dealing with. But that would be my advice to counter that and say, okay, now that I have it narrowed down, I don't need to talk to 100 users. Let me talk to 2 of your users and then ask them the question. Because I'm serious, how did that horse perform for you? Could it pull the plow or not? And the guy that had it before mine, if he lies too, then you up the creek without a paddle. So sorry about that.
Amazing insight there. So I'm actually going to move to Aaron. And Aaron, since you actually signed a paycheck, for these ERP vendors, so you definitely have to know how to uncover these financial risks, because these are the real risks that are going to be there for the company. And as the CFO, you don't want any surprises in the contract. That should be your goal. So what has been your experience overall in uncovering these risks? What is your advice for the manufacturing executives in understanding what is a customization, what is configuration, and what is going to be integration, especially when you are looking at just one platform as part of your demo when you are shopping around for ERP system?
So I'll say there's an old saying that I like: if you have to look at the contract, you've already lost. So the second you start saying, what does this contract actually, and that's post-signing, right? So if you're looking at the contract to see what's been covered and what's not, and you're already in trouble. Now, I'm not saying that. Now that's post signing, and not pre. Obviously, you should review everything before you sign to know exactly what you're getting into. Everyone covered things really well. I think the first thing you have to ask yourself, and let's back up a bit, is there's no hard fast rule with this.
Okay.
There's no you should never customize. Yes, customization. I don't have to go over the risk. Everyone's already talked about the risk. Martin and Chris and Ashish and Michael said it much better than I ever could. Could it theoretically be a heck of a lot more expensive? Absolutely. Will it cause all these issues when you attempt to upgrade? Yes. Do you know your upgrade schedule? Maybe not. I'd be kind of surprised if you're upgrading all the time, except for certain things. Ashish, I would say one comment. I have never believed a product roadmap ever sent to me. I don't believe there's a pot of gold at the end of it. I think that anything that they've promised, if it doesn't exist when you buy the thing, it might never. That's kind of usually my opinion, just because I know what I'm buying because it's right there. I can't predict the future. So that's kind of like a high level from risk perspective. I think if you map out, as just everyone says here, what happens next. So you're doing this for a reason. You're customizing or you're configuring or orchestrating a customization. There, sorry, Martin, I just want to put that in there. All for a business need. And let's be clear, no ERP is perfect, as Michael says. So you're either changing the data to make the ERP work for you, changing the input, or you're changing it while it's being created in the ERP to get the output that you need. That type of risk factor is really, I boil it down to first, will it actually work? So before from the finance perspective, even before we get to cost, does this thing actually work? Will it actually meet the business spec? And I think a lot of us, I know I forget that all the time because I'm so focused on the P&L. So what's it going to cost? Well, is it actually going to solve the problem? And from an IT perspective, I can totally understand. Can I actually support this afterwards? Where am I going to get the support from? How's that cost going to happen? All these basic questions. So what happens day 2? Ultra important, because that's going to help build your P&L. But in the end, will it actually function? I think that's the greatest risk. And I think it's the risk that I personally forget the most about, which is the most obvious risk of, will this thing actually work for the user? Not for us either paying for it, trying to predict how much it's going to cost, or the poor folks over here who have to maintain it somehow for the user. I would go back to that. And that's the number one thing I got to think about is, will this thing work in the future? And because just because you customize, what happens if the business need changes, which is going to? How flexible are we in this thing to change it again? And though that's it's odd for me saying that. Usually I'm thinking about from another perspective, but in this case especially, it's and if you have to customize it and spend a whole bunch of money to customize it, well, the answer is if you don't do that and take on all these extra process risks, you're out of business. Well, the cost of doing business. So all the preparatory work that we're doing, I think is ultra important. We have to do. That's our job. But at the end, it goes back down to, from a user perspective, does this thing actually work? And will it work in the future?
So I am actually going to have a comment there, and this is coming from one of the episodes that we have done recently, as part of this series itself. And this comment is actually coming from Tom Rodden. He's part of the panels many of the times. And one of the things that he mentioned when he was going through the evaluation process, and one of the experiences that he has had is, initially the vendor actually claimed that, maybe the capability was there, maybe there was a gray area, but after doing the POC, they uncovered that the capability was not there. So you mentioned, Aaron, that you don't believe in product roadmap. You know how sales
There's
demos
a skeptical of a product roadmap.
Yes, yes. But at the same time, when you look at the sales demo, they are designed to make things appear simple because you are not going to spend years just doing the demo. So you will never know the deeper capabilities in terms of what the ERP can support and what it cannot support. So your comment was, will it work in the future? So how do you ensure during the demo whether the product is really going to work in the future? Because sometimes it could be just a sales brush off.
So I'll say my comment on demos, and it's the old joke of, the devil comes to a person and says, you have a choice between, heaven and hell. And he shows this is what hell is like. And this is beautiful paradise and everything's wonderful. And he talks to people there and they're all having a great time. He says, mine's made up. I want hell. All right, goes to hell. And it's everything that you think of with pitchforks and flames and everything. So it goes to the devil, says, what the heck is this? This is utterly different than you showed me before. Oh, that was the demo. So that's my thoughts on demos.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think something I learned a long while ago as a CIO is never trust what an IT salesperson is telling you until it's proven. Yeah, that old saying about I'm from Missouri, prove it. Until it's physically proven, do not believe it. And I've even had salespeople in a past, from a big company as well, put some stuff in PowerPoint slides that turned out not to be true. And we ended up going back to them and they got a whole lot of money back off them because the salesperson would actually put stuff that was incorrect on their slide. So yeah, you have to that. And also the other famous phrase that none of us believe anymore is it's in the next release. And I just want to add those two things in because, yeah, until it's physically proven, I don't care whether it's a salesperson telling me or another customer who happens to be a friendly customer to the actual OEM telling me, unless I can actually prove it, I don't believe it.
So, Martin, I'll comment on that exactly. So I say it's in the next release sounds like the IT version of a country song, right? So I find that. So Sam, to go back to your original question, exactly what Martin says, riff off that. How do you know this stuff actually works? I think the only way is you have users with really the scars, the actual experience, and saying all those different. Show me how it does. And specifically, or you spin this thing up. Show me how it does X. Show me how, and give the actual scenarios that you're dealing with today and all the different pain points that you have, and make them prove it out. And in any point in time in which they can't prove it, or, oh, well, I have to load this. And if it loads too quickly, automatically be suspicious. Like, what did you just do there? Is that, you don't have to see it load. I'm just going to show you the completed query. Like, no, I want to see how long this, if they say, oh, well, it's in a spun up environment and the query time takes a while. So it's like, I don't care. Show me something real. And in my mind, that's the closest thing you can get to. If you're really lucky, and I think this is next to impossible to ever happen, see an actual live version from someone else using it. If you can go on-prem somewhere else. Good luck with that ever happening. But if you could do that, that's great. I would not put that in your criteria because it's like the criteria that will never be fulfilled. But from a demo perspective, I always go back to like take all your pain points and have them prove. Not say, hey, does it do this? They say yes. No, show me. Show me how you do X, and in a live environment, not your demo environment. In my mind, that's the only way.
Yeah, I was going to say yes. If the investment is significant, right, in that ERP, or you're getting into a new complex area which is new, right? It's been around GA for a year or something. The vendors sometimes, it's depending on how the vendors offer you to go and talk to reference clients, right, who have implemented it with them, right, during the pre-GA and how it worked out, right? So what were the pain points and all. So that will give you a good glimpse of whether you up for the cutting edge of that, that technology, or do you want it to mature because typically after a couple of years, that particular functionality matures, right? And depending on how the government laws are, regulations are, many times some of these software changes, right? Is the vendor doing it on time, or is there a lag? And we, Sam, I think you brought a topic where I think I interpreted it differently, but there's certain functionality that the vendor doesn't provide, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like I would say tax calculation. Like if you look at Vertex or Sabrix, typically referred to as bolt-ons to the original ERP system. So they also have to sync up, because the bolt-on also has to follow the main ERP's version and compatibility. Because if you might end up into that soup also, that you buy a bolt-on like a tax calculation, which does tax calculation entire US and the international also, and your ERP has moved on to a new version, right? But your tax calculation has not caught up. So now there's incompatibility there too, right? I mean, so when you're making decisions on bolt-on, when you're making decisions on ERP, you have to follow that roadmap of how that whole ecosystem is going to behave also. Because if you're making significant investment, right? I mean, so you have to kind of weigh in all that. In fact, I was at a client where their legal department was also looking at how stable that company is, and if you sue them, will they be able to pay back the legal fees and all, right? So there are a lot of angles on the legal side that we don't want to go into, but people get to do all that evaluation before they invest in the vendor, right? So, or if they are going to be taken over by somebody, are we holding the bag in that case, right? So you make an investment in that vendor, and that vendor is bought by somebody else. Now we are fighting the compatibility issue there too. So all those have to be weighed in too.
Yeah. So, Chris, I'm actually going to have a question for you, since you mentioned the 1500 switches in case of an ERP, and a lot of people are talking about different demos to figure out what is going to be customization, what is going to be integration. We all know that we cannot flip the 1500 switches to know where the customization resides. And I'm pretty sure you have been part of many different deals. And if you have had a lot of bolt-ons as part of the deals, you know how much maintenance nightmare you are going to have. I mean, I don't want to be part of that project, to be honest. It's a nightmare, because to get hold of these people, to figure out who's failing, where exactly it is failing, and why the solution is not working because of 15 different add-ons. So in your experience, let's say today you are not the salesperson, Chris. Okay, you are actually buying the ERP software. So let's say if you are on the other side of the table and you have to vet a vendor, what will be your approach in identifying these customization so that they don't actually result in maintenance nightmare later on?
That's a great point. And believe it or not, I'm an end user as well. So I may own it, sell it, but I'm actually a consumer. And to that point, my team presents me with gaps. So as she said, there are gaps in my solution. I'm like, okay, how do I overcome my gaps? Do I build it? Do I buy it? And so the advice to people is just that, is before you hurry and build something, did somebody already do it, right? Does it? Can I plug it in? Can it work? And how many of those plug-in pieces, and then you go back to their compatibility, and you're absolutely right. So vetting that, and again, I think I would tell people to be patient in the sales process until they've kicked all the tires and really completed the due diligence. And Martin, I am from Missouri, so show me, show you. But to that point, it really is the burden of due diligence to make sure that you really check your boxes and you don't quit early. And if these are key processes, and even if it's something that there's a gap, well, really to beat up on a pre-sales design concept to see how feasible is that? To Aaron's point, will it work? Can you really do that while I get the right user experience? And you can push more in that pre-sales process to, understand compatibility with bolt-ons versus I'm going to build it or am I going to buy it, and whether I want to do the engineering and then try to figure out every feature I need versus this guy spent money and there's some synergy and there's 5 other people using it. And to Michael's point, reference checks and really having those conversations. It's all of those things. It's really evaluating the bolt-on and compatibility with other bolt-ons. And again, what's there? It's a compliance with the manufacturer. New release comes out. Hey, 90 days, you got to have it ready. So there's some of those things. So I'm waiting for my guy to update his and I can't upgrade. We've got to avoid those things by understanding the vendor's contract with the manufacturer, contract with you in terms of just expectation of release dates. You brought up the other one, who owns the code. Remember, a lot of people can rebrand. I can sell turnkey ERP. Well, it isn't mine, but I added a little piece to it, but it's who's down there, who's underneath. But at the end, if I've got a layer on top, you're dealing with me, and then you've got the manufacturer for all that core functionality. So there's some dual responsibility, but you absolutely, when you get a branded layer on top of a platform, you're dealing with the guy that built that. And as it comes to code, it's funny. I just had a chat with a client where they may bring another partner. I go, is my code protected? Meaning somebody else gets in there, they can't open my stuff up.
Yep.
So I locked it. I own it. The customer's using it, but I own it. So back to contracts. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces here. If you're buying IP, who owns it? Do you own it? Can you service it? Can you further extend it, right, without having inordinate fees? So a lot of due diligence that's required by ownership as they evaluate. Do I customize it? Do I build it? Do I buy it? And the other thing I'll throw in there about integrations, I said peripheral. Well, that's great if you're using an API that's going through business logic. But if you get somebody come in there, oh, I'm going to build it and directly integrate with tables, that you don't want to go there either, because the compromising nature of them trying to figure out how to match that business logic to create an intact, a gap transaction. So a lot of risks, like I said, but I think a lot of the due diligence on the front end can avoid back end problems. And the other comment is stream of consciousness development, right? Ashish, have the gaps identified. They're on the list. Freeze. We're not, add this. That's the meandering development that never ends. That's a huge risk to companies too. And they've got to have discipline to really flush out the design and what do I need and what's it look like. I had somebody, their stream of consciousness Power BI report. When's it going to end? I don't know. They keep thinking of stuff. So anyway, a lot of comments there, guys.
Yeah, so great insights, and I'm going to have one question for you overall in determining, when to use the integration, when it is appropriate to use, acceptable to use sort of the add-on and the configuration. So let's say if I'm buying an ERP, and a lot of times how it is in the technical community, in the ERP community, we all have tendency to say yes to everything, even if it is going to be completely off. Okay, so what is going to happen is, let's say if I am working in a completely off industry, and we know for a fact that this ERP is probably not going to work for the other industry because they might have completely different sales orders, completely different purchase order. It was never designed for that industry. But what the vendor is saying is, I can customize it. I can probably, create an add-on. Just because you can create it, you are probably going to commit to it. So now, in your experience, let's say if you were to make a decision between what is the acceptable add-on, what is the acceptable integration, and what is the acceptable customization, what would be your recommendation, Chris?
Yeah, really. I mean, even as I sell a deal, if it's more than 5% customization, and in that classification, these are invasive code modifications. Again, integrations, they don't count in that 5%. Custom reports don't count in that 5%. But if I have to come in there and build 30% functionality because of your industry, that's a big risk. What I would say to that is go back and find other people that are in your industry and say, what did you use? Exactly. Because to reinvent the wheel, believe me, it's 2021. Back in the 80s, there was nothing. 90s, a little more. But now there's been so many cycles of ERP evolution. I've got to believe that for most of those industry requirements, that somebody's out there already crossed that territory, and a business is going to benefit because they've gone through that and they've thought of things that you haven't thought of. And that's where that stream, I forgot about that. And that's where it just never ends. But that would be my recommendation. If you're feeling 30%, more than 5%, ask a question. Okay, and again, excluding reporting and integration work. But if it's I can build this module for you, you don't need a module. Somebody probably already did something. That's my advice, like I said, because we won't sell deals like that. We don't want that kind of work.
So you are a good guy, Chris, but I can almost guarantee that not everybody is going to be as good. So, and by the way, even if they are good, they might not be as skilled. A skill is very important. You really need to know what you are doing, to be honest. In the ERP community, it's not that everybody is going to be the same.
One more comment. If you get that, tell me what I need. Tell me what you need. Tell me what I need. Tell me what you need. You don't have anybody that can add value. So again, a lot of developers, sure, I can do that. What do you need? That's a sure warning sign right there. If I walk and say, I know what you need, let me show you. Okay, you're an expert. That's a big difference that can help you in the front end of the process too.
Okay, amazing. So Martin, I'm actually going to ask you the same question. And one of the things, if you want to know the percentages that Chris just mentioned, that you have to know whether you are doing 5% versus 30%. One of the things that you have to know is who is really owning the code and what are the customizations as part of your ERP. If you don't know that, how are you going to figure out how much you have to build? How much gap analysis do you have to do to figure out, what level of customization is going to be there? So in your experience, what is the acceptable level of customization? How are you going to identify the acceptable level of customization, configuration, and the integration?
Well, I think you have to start with the acceptable level being 0. And you have to start there. And I think it was said earlier on, play with it first, use it for a while if you can. Michael said that it's easier said than done. I've had the the overall owner of the very large company and the general manager of the company, one of his companies, with an ERP we were putting in from scratch, say, yep, we're committing, we're not having any customizations, yep, customizations are bad, and the owner actually saying, yeah, they can come to me to get approval for any customizations. That lasted about 5 minutes, even though reinforcement or whatever else. But we have to do it because we do business this way or whatever else. And I think all of those pieces they happen every single time. I see Mike smiling, I see Aaron smiling, and I see Ashley smiling because it happens every single time. You go in, you get authority at the highest possible level to say we will not have customizations because they are bad. They're going to cost you an arm and a leg, and it's going to kill you forevermore. And the trouble is that they all want to carry on doing business the same way, and the same way they've always done it. They don't want to change. And you have to really push back on them hard to say, why are we different? Yeah, what difference does it make to the bottom line, the fact that we do it that way, whereas everybody else seems to do it differently, and that's the way the ERP is set up. Yeah, and I think we've talked before, Sam, and I've argued a lot of times. As a CIO, I spend more of my time doing change management than I do doing technology-related stuff, because this is a pure people and process type issue. Yeah. Why on earth do you have to do it that way? It doesn't make any difference. It's not adding dollars to your bottom line. Yeah, if you can prove to me that is adding dollars, millions of dollars, or whatever else to the bottom line, then I'll consider it as a customization. If you cannot, then why on earth are we doing it? And it can't be because we've always done it that way.
I just want to second what Martin says. It's the most expensive words in manufacturers. We always done it this way. On Chris said that too. Don't go out and have them design 30%. Even if you industry, there's only 3 in the United States. There got to be worldwide some people that use in the system. Take what they have. Don't do 30% customization. There got to be 29% of that already out, and then your ERP company can do that extra 1% because I have to do it my way. We all think we're different, but you know what? There's only so many ways to skin a cat, and they all end up the same way. So why do we say we are different? Do it the way that makes the most money. So and that's what Martin says on Chris. And Chris says that's good. I'm as your vendor saying 5% or whatever your number is. That's when I have to push back and say, why would you do that? And same thing with Martin is like, why are you so different? Maybe your processes are wrong. They need to be looked at. It's not the ERP system because, I don't know if it was Aaron that said it, but they've been around since the 80s. Yeah, there was a lot of tweaking in the 80s. But as we moved up, that stuff became standardized. Things became, and the big companies driving it to the suppliers and to the vendors and saying, hey, that's how our system works. Get a system that communicates with our system. I don't think you need to do 30% customization.
Yeah, and Sam, I'm just going to quickly add that most of these well-established ERP vendors, right, they have a very good user community, which also talks to the vendor, right? I mean, that this functionality is consistently being asked in this industry, right? And that gets added in the next release. I mean, I know we talked about release, but sometimes those releases could be good for us. But we only talked about the downside of ERP, but what I was saying is ERP could be used as a basis to standardize, right? It start moving towards standard industry processes, right? And you should have about 10 to 20% of customization, like we said last time, right? I mean, 75 to 80%, you will have a good industry match, unless you're doing something really different, like, very, very unique and nobody else has. That's where you go about doing customization.
I guess, Ashish, you mentioned something that actually, I think I went cold in the heart there when you mentioned user communities. I go from a user of this, of the ERP. I remember nothing scared me more when I went to my tech team. I said, "Yeah, this report system we bought doesn't seem to work," and literally the guy Googled to try to find the answer, and I'm like, "We didn't have the support internally to do this. Like you're literally the support was Google. Are you kidding me? Oh, I'm going to check the message boards. You're good." I almost had a heart attack. Now, I would just say from that perspective, either you be very, very upfront with your internal team, if you have that internal expertise, or at least you have turnkey solutions there, or someone on call, like a Chris, that you can get a hold of that's part of your team, whether or not they're employed or not, to solve that. That's the only thing I would bring, because if you're relying solely on, I know you weren't mentioning it that way from a tech support perspective. You're using that from a advice perspective of usage. That's the only thing I would mention.
Yeah, in the user community, I was referring to as fellow customers like us, right, who have invested in that ERP.
Absolutely.
And are very, very, upfront with the problems, right? They are not hiding or anything like that.
I'm a member of many of those when it comes to every single general ledger known to man.
Yep.
So absolutely.
So the only comment I'm going to have related to user community is, let's say if I'm using ERP1 and the same ERP is being used by another customer, they might have 15 add-ons. They might still call it, I don't know, maybe SAP or maybe Microsoft Dynamics, but they would not know that they are actually using 15 add-ons on top of it. Customers just don't know what they don't know. So that is the only comment I will have. Now we'll take the closing advice. So Chris, what is your closing advice as far as the customization goes?
I think that really to perform the due diligence in the pre-sales process and identify gaps and get a fix list and really visualize the solution that's being proposed. And ROI, I didn't throw that out there, but Aaron made that comment. And look for the ROI. And if it's something that doesn't have an ROI and can we have a different process, look for the workaround. Be adaptable. That's what I would say. Okay, instead of just jumping right in. And there's a lot to learn. There's people that customize because they just don't learn the systems. And so learn first, as Michael had said as well. So that's it.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. Martin, what is your closing advice?
I think my closing advice would be, if you can, get them to use it, and Michael suggested this, get them to use it as is for a period, first of all, and try it like that, then think about customizing if you really have to. But for every customization, look at what is the bottom line. How does that impact my bottom line? And if you can't prove it impacts your bottom line, then why on earth are you doing it?
Okay, amazing. So we need to make it super short in terms of closing advice because some of you might have meetings. Ashish, what is your short closing advice?
I was saying that do your evaluation, right, and how much is the fit gap, right, of your tool, and then and see what the industry is doing in the same thing in your same industry. Is the solution better, meeting your expectations or not, and then go with it. Don't buy before doing all that evaluation. Obviously, nobody does, but that's the advice.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Ashish. Mike, what is your short closing advice?
Well, like I said before, businesses are alike. Even if we think our widget is different, there got to be something out there. Start with something that is common, that is out there. Use it. I think Martin just said that to use it. Then get your group, your internal group back. Get your vendor back and says, okay, this question comes up, this change, this customization comes up. Can you do it? What is the impact of that change to us on how does it long-term impact that? And then make the decision, is it really needed or not?
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. Aaron, what is your short closing advice, please?
So I'd say customizations need to be wary, so have a very strict and robust gatekeeping process per customization. Therefore, you don't have to say no to them, but you have to have a good gatekeeping process.
I agree. I completely agree. So thank you so much, guys, for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you all. Good to see you guys again.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Martin Davis, head over to dunemassociates.com. It's DUNELMASSOCIATES.com. If you want to learn more about Ashish Perlekar, follow and connect with him on LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about Chris Gherardini, head over to turnkeytech.com. It's TURNKEYTEC.com. If you want to learn more about Aaron Spool, head over to eventusag.com. It's EVENTUSAG.com. If you want to learn more about Mike Slagenhofer, head over to acuity.com. It's ACUITY.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Andy Pradico, who discusses why ERP demos are designed to deceive and why ERP salespeople are more incentivized to sell their products than the success of their customers. Also, the interview with Rich Said, who describes his journey and the pitfalls of implementing 6 ERP projects throughout his career. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.